I can believe it. I mean,
Really?
I've lived it all, and I'm trying to sort of. I don't think anybody's really quite explained it, or certainly at the beginning. I mean, I wasn't allowed to vote anyway. I think I would be tempted to have stayed.
In a world where fame often fades faster than it arrives, some artists manage to transcend time. Their careers evolve, their image shifts, and their impact endures long after the headlines change. Over decades, some become household names not because they're constantly in the news, but because they've carved out a space in our collective memory. These are the legends whose influence is measured not by trending topics, but by legacy. And when it comes to British music legends, few names command the same respect as Sir Cliff Richard. Yet lately, fans have asked, where is he? Why don't we see or hear from him as often as we used to? Today, we're diving into the truth behind the quieter chapter of Cliff Richard's public life and uncovering what really happened to the man once dubbed the British Elvis. To understand the man Cliff Richard is today, you have to appreciate the journey that brought him here. A journey that began over 6 decades ago. Born Harry Roger Webb in 1940 in Lucknow, India, and raised in the UK, he would go on to become a central figure in British music history. His breakout came in 1958 with the single Move It, a raw, energetic track that's often credited as the first authentic British rock and roll record. Long before the Beatles made their mark, Cliff Richard was already lighting the fuse for a music revolution. As the 1960s unfolded, Cliff became a household name. He wasn't just a singer, he was an all-around entertainer. His popularity exploded thanks to a string of hit singles, chart dominance, and a smooth transition into television and film. His appearances in movies like The Young Ones and Summer Holiday gave fans more than just songs, they gave them a lifestyle to idolize. He projected a wholesome, clean-cut image that appealed to parents and teenagers alike, earning him the nickname the Peter Pan of pop, a nod to his seemingly ageless presence and eternal charm. While many of his contemporaries faded into nostalgia acts, Cliff stayed relevant. In the 1970s and 80s, he didn't just ride the wave of changing musical styles, he adapted to them. His 1979 hit We Don't Talk Anymore brought him into the synth-pop world, showing that he wasn't just clinging to past glories, he was evolving. Each decade brought a new version of Cliff Richard, but underneath the stylistic updates was a man grounded in consistency, professionalism, and a quiet, personal resilience. Part of that resilience came from his deeply rooted Christian faith. As he matured, that faith became more visible in his music and public statements, adding another layer to his persona. He wasn't just a pop star chasing hits. He was a man trying to align his art with his beliefs. That authenticity gave him staying power, especially in an industry where reinvention often comes at the cost of identity. Through the years, Cliff Richard didn't just maintain a career, he built a legacy. With over 250 million records sold globally, he became one of the best-selling music artists of all time. His chart performance is staggering, 14 UK #1 singles, and a presence on the charts across multiple decades. There's hardly a corner of British pop culture he hasn't touched. During the Christmas season, for instance, his songs like Mistletoe and Wine and Saviour's Day became seasonal anthems. For many families, it simply wasn't Christmas without Cliff. It wasn't just about music, though. Cliff was an all-encompassing media figure. His TV specials drew millions, and his stage presence remained magnetic well into his 70s. He starred in more than 10 feature films and embarked on countless international tours. What's remarkable is how he managed to connect with different generations. Whether you were screaming in the crowd in 1958, watching his Christmas specials in the 90s, or discovering him through retro playlists today, Cliff Richard somehow found a way to be part of your story. He wasn't just popular. He was part of the national fabric. In a rapidly changing world, Cliff offered familiarity and comfort. And then, things shifted. Fame, as it often does, took a turn. The same media that had once celebrated him began scrutinizing him with an intensity that bordered on invasive. Public opinion wavered as tabloid culture took over, and Cliff found himself facing challenges no artist should have to endure, including a police investigation in 2014 that eventually led to no charges and a legal victory against the BBC for their coverage of the ordeal. Despite that dark chapter, Cliff Richard's legacy remains intact. His story is one of perseverance, of reinvention without compromise, and of a connection with the public that few artists ever achieve. From the bright lights of early rock and roll to the enduring sparkle of Christmas ballads, his voice has echoed through decades. Cliff Richard didn't just survive the changing tides of the music industry, he mastered them. And in doing so, he became more than an idol. He became a living icon. Despite the polished, wholesome image Cliff Richard maintained for most of his career, the later chapters of his life brought a wave of publicity that he neither invited nor deserved. In 2014, everything changed. South Yorkshire Police, in coordination with the BBC, conducted a live broadcast raid on Cliff's Berkshire home, an unprecedented move for a public figure with no charges against him. The allegations, related to historical sexual abuse, were shocking, not just because of their content, but because of how they were handled. Cliff had not even been interviewed by the police before his name and address were splashed across national news. What followed was nearly 2 years of relentless media coverage, public speculation, and personal torment. Throughout it all, Cliff Richard maintained his innocence, and ultimately he was vindicated. In 2016, the Crown Prosecution Service announced that there was insufficient evidence to bring a case. He was cleared. No trial, no conviction, no guilt. But that didn't mean the story was over. The damage was already done. For a man who had built his entire life on trust, dignity, and integrity, this kind of exposure was brutal. Cliff later spoke openly about the emotional and psychological toll it took, describing how the incident drove him into a dark place. The man who had once lit up stadiums and television screens was now struggling with anxiety, fear, and a deep sense of injustice. Eventually, the BBC admitted its error and paid damages, acknowledging that their coverage had crossed a line. It wasn't just a matter of reporting, it was an invasion. And for Cliff, someone who had spent decades under the spotlight by choice, this experience redefined the nature of fame. Suddenly, the spotlight wasn't a stage, it was a searchlight, and it burnt. This moment changed everything. Cliff Richard, who had lived most of his life in front of the camera, began to step back, not out of defeat, but out of self-preservation. He made a conscious decision to reduce his visibility, to protect his peace, and to draw boundaries around his public and private lives. That didn't mean he disappeared. Far from it. Cliff continued to create. He recorded new music, released autobiographies, and made occasional television and stage appearances. But the pace was different now. The urgency was gone. He was no longer chasing charts or media cycles. Instead, he was embracing something more important: control. One of the clearest signs of this shift was his decision to sell his UK property, the very home that had been violated during the police raid. He relocated to his residences in Portugal and Barbados, places where he could enjoy a slower rhythm of life. There, he found solace in routine. He played tennis regularly, spent time with close friends, and leaned deeply into his faith. The same faith that had guided him through the heights of fame and now helped carry him through the turbulence of public scrutiny. For many longtime fans, his retreat from the spotlight felt abrupt. Cliff Richard had been a constant for decades on radio, television, film, and stage. His presence was a fixture in British culture. So when he began to pull back, it felt like a loss. But in truth, it was something else entirely. It was Cliff finally drawing the line, saying, "This is where I end and the fame begins." And yet, he never truly left. Whenever he resurfaced, whether to celebrate his 80th birthday, release a new album, or perform on a special occasion, he did so with intention. Every appearance became meaningful, every project something he genuinely wanted to share. There was no pressure to prove anything. He had already done that, over and over again, for 6 decades. Today, Cliff Richard represents more than just a storied music career. He symbolizes resilience, the ability to withstand the pressures of fame, the cruelty of public judgment, and the toll of false accusations, and still emerge with grace. His journey is a reminder that even legends have limits, and that choosing peace isn't walking away. It's walking toward something more lasting, something real. Cliff Richard may no longer dominate the pop charts like he once did, but his legacy is anything but forgotten. In fact, recent years have only reaffirmed his place in music history. In 2018, he released Rise Up, his first album of new material in 14 years. It wasn't just a nostalgia project, it reached the UK Top 10, proving that even decades into his career, Cliff still had the power to connect. 2 years later, he followed up with Music. The Air That I Breathe, another Top 10 success. These weren't just symbolic gestures, they were real artistic contributions that stood shoulder to shoulder with contemporary releases. What's more remarkable is how he continues to engage with his fan base. Cliff has never been an artist who simply performs and disappears. Even now, well into his 80s, he still appears in interviews, connects with audiences through special performances, and provides glimpses into his life that remind fans he hasn't gone anywhere. He's just chosen a quieter frequency. And when he sings, there's still that unmistakable clarity and warmth in his voice, as if time itself has taken a pause whenever he steps up to the mic. The music industry, which can be famously fickle, has come full circle in its appreciation for him. He's been knighted by the Queen, awarded countless lifetime achievement honors, and continues to serve as a benchmark for what it means to sustain a career with both commercial success and personal integrity. Young artists today might be climbing the charts, but many of them are doing so on a foundation laid by Cliff Richard, a pioneer who helped shape British pop before it was even fully recognized as a global force. And for a man who was once everywhere on TV, in the charts and on film, it's worth noting that his reduced visibility doesn't equate to being forgotten. In fact, his absence has made his legacy more striking. His influence still ripples through the industry, in the music, in the values, and in the way he's carried himself throughout his career. There's a myth in celebrity culture that if you're not constantly in the spotlight, you're irrelevant. Cliff Richard's life stands in direct contrast to that idea. By stepping away from the constant noise of fame, he's actually carved out a more meaningful existence, choosing when to speak, when to perform, and when to step back has given him control, not just over his career, but over his life. Rather than chasing attention or trying to stay in the media's good graces, Cliff has focused on what truly matters: his faith, his friendships, and his passion for music. He's not trying to appeal to every generation on TikTok, and he doesn't need to. His legacy speaks louder than any trending moment could. There's power in that, in being relevant without needing to scream for attention. This stage of his life offers something rare, an example of how a public figure can age with grace, dignity, and self-awareness. Cliff Richard hasn't clung to the fame of his youth, nor has he courted controversy to stay visible. Instead, he's let his work and his values define him. He's shown that a quiet presence can be just as powerful as a loud one. To some, his reduced media presence might seem like he's vanished, but that view misses the bigger picture. Cliff Richard isn't hiding. He's living on his own terms. He's spending his days in places he loves, surrounded by people he trusts, doing the things that bring him peace. And when he does re-emerge, whether through a new song, a surprise performance, or a heartfelt interview, it feels special. It feels earned. In a world where fame is often loud and fleeting, Cliff Richard's story is a reminder that legacy isn't built in moments. It's built over time. Through music, resilience, and authenticity, he's crafted something lasting, something real, something that refuses to fade. In a time where headlines are dominated by quick scandals and fleeting internet fame, the full picture of Cliff Richard often gets overlooked. His name pops up now and then, usually tied to nostalgic throwbacks, chart anniversaries, or recycled controversy. But the deeper, present-day story is rarely told. Behind the filtered lens of the media is a man still deeply connected to what always mattered to him: music, faith, and making a positive impact. Though no longer in the daily spotlight, Cliff remains active in ways that reflect his values. He continues to support a number of charitable organizations, particularly those tied to Christian missions and children's welfare. These aren't vanity projects. They're causes he's stood by for decades, woven into the fabric of who he is. For Cliff, giving back has never been a performance. It's a calling. He also hasn't completely disappeared from public life. While he's more selective now, he still sits down for interviews that offer real insight into his journey, sharing stories, reflections, and hard-earned wisdom. His 2020 memoir, The Dreamer, became a bestseller not just because of who he is, but because of how honestly he told his story. Fans and newcomers alike saw a man who had lived through fame, criticism, joy, pain, and ultimately peace with grace intact. Even musically, Cliff hasn't hung up his mic for good. In 2022, he released a Christmas single that captured the warmth and tradition fans have come to associate with his holiday offerings. It was a gentle reminder that he still has something to say, and he's still capable of saying it beautifully. He's hinted at future projects too, not full albums or tours, but songs and performances when they feel right. There's no pressure now, just pure creative freedom. What stands out most about Cliff Richard today is how content he seems. Unlike many celebrities who struggle with relevance or burn out trying to hold on to their past, Cliff chose a different path. He didn't vanish, he stepped back. He didn't lose the spotlight. He let it go on his own terms. And in doing so, he preserved something many others don't: peace of mind, a meaningful legacy, and the respect of generations who watched him grow, not just as a performer, but as a person. He may not trend often, but what he represents is timeless. Quiet strength, enduring faith, and a career that truly mattered. So, has Cliff Richard really vanished from the spotlight? Not quite. He's still around, still singing, still creating, and still beloved. But he's no longer the media's puppet, no longer answering to the demands of fame. And in doing so, he's shown us that success isn't just about staying visible. It's about staying true to yourself. Whether you're a lifelong fan or someone just discovering his story, Cliff Richard's journey is a testament to resilience, reinvention, and the power of knowing when to step back so you can move forward. If you enjoyed this look into the life and legacy of a true musical icon, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment below. What's your favorite Cliff Richard moment? And of course, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the lives of legendary figures. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious.